Hello, this is Grant Richardson. I just wanted to give a little prologue or prolegomena to the video that you're about ready to see. If you have not had a philosophical background, you might be a little frustrated with watching this video, and you may want to skip to the next video, which may not be so heavy philosophically. But if you prefer to watch it and you haven't had a philosophical background, I try my best to explain each term that we use here. And I hope if you do listen, that you'll be able to get something very important for your soul. Thanks for this part, and the video will begin in just a few seconds. I am launching a series dealing with the critique of progressive Christianity. Today, we want to look at an overview of the issue. What is going on with so many people deconstructing their faith, going into agnosticism or atheism or into mysticism or whatever view they have come to in their rejection of evangelical Christianity. So we want to take a look at this. We're going to look at the subject from a philosophical, theological, and biblical standpoint. I know many of you probably have not had an extensive philosophical background, so I'm going to try to boil the philosophical concepts down so that we can get a hold of them and understand them in a fallacious sort of way. And then the theological concepts will do the same thing. And even in the biblical presentation, we'll be careful to try to explain various terminology. But today we want to look at an overview of the issue. There was a book written by John Marriott. He, I believe, teaches at Biola in California. He wrote a book, The Anatomy of Deconversion. He said in that book, tens of thousands of evangelicals have deconverted from the faith. Now, that's shocking. He also says that people are deconverting at a faster rate than any time in history. So what we're facing here is a major issue. Probably it is due to inadequate teaching. There's probably many reasons, many causes, many sources as to why this is happening. But we live in a day where evangelicals have not been taught very well. I hope to fill that void to some degree here. Now, what we're going to try to do is to deconstruct the deconstructionists. Now, what does deconstruction mean? It means that people are looking at their evangelical faith and they take apart this part and don't believe it anymore, and another part and another, until they come to the position of a non-evangelical whatever. But one of the problems of the presupposition of deconstruction is that deconstruction needs to be deconstructed itself. But that's evidently what they don't allow to happen. So we're going to try to deconstruct the deconstructionalists. The issue revolves around epistemology. Epistemology is how do we know what we know is true? Or is there even any truth at all? So epistemology is the study of knowledge, how we come to conclusions about truth. Now, what is the definition that we're dealing with, the problem of progressive Christianity? Now, I believe much of progressive Christianity comes from postmodernism, we'll take a look at this in a little bit more detail. But postmodernism denies that rationalism of the Enlightenment is the way to find truth or to come to any kind of certainty. And it also denies that science can come to truth or to a prime mover, for example. Now, secular postmodernism departs from modernism, that is what we've just mentioned, philosophy and science, and distrusts any grand narrative. A grand narrative would be a universal position, like God is a universal conclusion. There is a God, he exists, he has certain attributes, he does certain things. But they do it through dialectical thinking. Now, dialectical thinking means that all thought is in process. Like one view of dialectical thinking is you have a thesis, and then after you establish the thesis, there is an antithesis, the opposite of the thesis. And the looking at the antithesis then forms a synthesis, which in turn, again, forms another thesis. And that thesis has an antithesis and a synthesis and another thesis, and on it goes. In other words, people with a dialectical mindset have a hard time coming to conclusions about truth or about the assertion of certainty or about coming to conclusions about God. They are suspicious of any meta-narrative, any universal answer, or any concept of absolute truth. Theological postmodernism is just a spin-off of secular postmodernism. It seeks to reform Christianity by reconstructing it into a new worldview that adapts to current cultural trends by deconstruction of evangelicalism, and they do it also by the dialectical process. They may not even be aware because they have grown up within a culture that thinks in terms of the dialectic rather than in terms of the proposition. So that's what we're dealing with. Now, where did the origin of post-conservatism come from? In the latter part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th century, liberalism came through German rationalism, which said that truth can be found through philosophy and also Darwinian evolution. And so that belief then developed the idea that there is no supernatural, the Bible is errant, that there is no truth in the Bible. Liberalism, by the middle of the 20th century, had greatly dissipated, and evangelicalism became the primary church attendance in terms of how people viewed things. Right after the middle of the 20th century, existentialism began. Existentialism is the denial of absolutes. Then by 1990s, then postmodernism, which grew out of existentialism, the denial of absolutes, began to say that we have to be skeptical about science, we have to be skeptical about philosophy, we have to be skeptical about Christianity, and we have to doubt them all. And what has resulted from this is a solipsism. What is solipsism? Solipsism is that there is no objective truth. Truth can only be found in my perspective. That is called perspectivalism. It's my viewpoint that all that really matters. It's nice that you're a Christian, but I'm an atheist. That's what I prefer to believe, as if that's the only issue is a person's preference. Then, as I said, existentialism grew in the 60s. Post-liberalism followed shortly after that. Panentheism became a phenomenon whereby God is in the world and the world is in God. We won't go into the details of that. Then along came the French postmodernists, which influenced all of North America, even to the almost every university, every high school, and in many grade schools as well. And so postmodernism has become the predominant thought in North America, maybe with the exception of certain engineering schools, and it's mainly the social sciences where that occurs. The emergent church, as I said, also began about 1990 and became full-fledged in the 21st century. The emergent church is primarily a postmodern church. There are two kinds of emergent churches, those who are philosophically postmodern and those who try to reach postmoderns by postmodern methodology. But what I'm speaking about is those who are philosophically postmodern, and that's the emergent church. And then progressive Christianity has come out of the emergent church. Like I saw one interview of a person that was actually a minister in an evangelical church in Arizona. And because he believed that the Bible offends the gay world, he left evangelicalism. And he said the reason why he left is that he had read a book called A New Kind of Christian by Brian McLaren. Well, the new kind of Christian isn't a biblical Christian. It's a postmodern Christian, a person who doubts, a person that looks at the world from a non-deductive, non-propositional standpoint. So that is where many of the progressive Christianities came in. And so here we see maybe a brief summary: the liberal church, the emergent church, and then progressive Christianity, which is really a new form of liberalism. Well, what are the beliefs, or how do you describe, rather than define, the progressive church or progressive Christianity? This movement reformulates its doctrines according to the prevailing trends of society that emphasize compassion, justice, and tolerance. Salvation is now rather than later. It embraces feminism and other twisting of scripture to accommodate to culture. Panentheism, contemplative mysticism, it has an emphasis on the kingdom here and now, and not so much about eternity, if there is even an eternity ahead. The acceptance of the gay lifestyle as genuinely Christian, and deconstruction is the method whereby you try to undo the teachings of the Bible, which evangelicals believe. At least evangelicals don't agree on everything, a lot of details. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about major truths that are firmly established by any honest interpretive person who is looking at scripture. They have a disenculturation. There's a separation from previous belief. They believed in evangelical doctrines, now they don't. Especially extant scriptures that violate current cultural norms. And therefore, their view is that the Bible is not the center of their belief. The Bible is informative. Jesus may not be God, but he's a good example. The very same thing as old liberalism. it looks like they have picked up much of the thinking from previous liberal viewpoints. They deny the substitutionary death of Christ. That is, Christ died for our sins. He took our hell that we may have his heaven. But they say that this is cosmic child abuse. They believe in a cultural justice, not a biblical justice. That requires some explanation, and we'll go into that later in a more formal perspective. There's a book called One Faith No Longer. The whole book says that those who have left the evangelical faith no longer believe in evangelicalism at all. So it's not a one faith with evangelicalism, and they go through great extent of documenting that by interviewing many people in this movement. Now, the biggest issue dealing with all of this is the issue of presupposition. That is, what they assume to be true to criticize evangelical ideas. Let's look at what a presupposition is. A presupposition is a thing tacitly assumed. They may not even be aware that the culture has informed their presupposition. This is especially true when it comes to dialectical thought. All of our universities and high schools teach it, so that's how they think. They can't think outside that box accurately and fairly. So a thing tacitly assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of argument or course of action. To suppose or assume beforehand is an assumption, a presupposition, or to take for granted in advance. Like the scientific worldview takes for granted that you can reach a prime mover, or maybe some of them don't even believe that much, but they believe that the only way that you can come to truth is outside the scientific method. But if there's anything metaphysical, anything beyond the physical, then they can't deal with that. So science can't deal with philosophy. They can't deal with the action of the mind. The action of the mind can't be scientifically put into a test tube. So a presupposition requires or implies an antecedent condition. What is bringing these people to a deconstruction of their faith? They have assumed certain things. Though that is what we want to try to get a look at. And it is an effect that they've already believed that produces the cause of their disbelief. What is an ultimate presupposition? An ultimate presupposition is a belief over which no other takes precedence. It's the foundation approach to reality. It's the fundamental belief, how you come to a conclusion. For the Christian, or the evangelical Christian, Scripture serves as his ultimate presupposition. It merely applies the doctrine of Scripture infallibility to the realm of knowing. That's the evangelical presupposition. The ultimate presupposition is a belief that takes precedence over another presupposition and therefore serves as a criterion for another. So what is the criterion for people becoming progressive Christians? There is a criterion. They may not recognize it, but there is one. An ultimate presupposition is a belief over which no other takes precedence then. For a Christian, the content of Scripture must serve as his ultimate presupposition. Now, let's look at, once again, at the presuppositions we have been talking about. In philosophy, the latter part of the 19th century, the first half of the first century, German rationalism came out of the Enlightenment, Kantian thinking, the assumption that we need to doubt everything outside of the ability of man to think. But that was an assumption. That was a presupposition. The same thing with science. The science has its presupposition. Many of the theories of science are actually philosophical and not scientific, but they portray themselves as scientific. There, no doubt, there is much wonderful and great about the true scientific method, and we're not criticizing that point. The Bible has a presupposition. If you want to define it, the primary presupposition of philosophy is German rationalism. The primary presupposition of science is empiricism. And the primary presupposition of Christians, we have a presupposition as well. Now, postmodernism has a presupposition, an ultimate presupposition, which is dialectical skepticism. And that skepticism has resulted in nihilism. Nihilism is the belief that there is no truth out there except some fragmented ideas that I may have as an individual. I'm just going to take a second here to pause our webinar, and I'm going to stop it so I can launch my iPad. Now I hope to give you a brief summary of what we have just studied. Basically, the idea that I tried to present was the concept of presupposition. Every approach to reality has an assumption, a fundamental belief system whereby they are going to try to use their methodology to come to a conclusion. Now, let's, for example, say that this sphere here is truth. We'll put it in here quickly. I'm writing with my fingers, so it's going to be a bit rough. Let's say that the first approach to truth is philosophy. Just put a P there. And philosophy has an assumption. And the assumption is their methodology, or what is called the modus operandi. What is the modus operandi that philosophy has presumed, or what they believe will find answers to truth? Well, to call it more philosophically, the term that's more philosophically acceptable is rationalism. Rationalism is the belief that man is the measure of man, that all man needs is to adequately think through what he has to in order to come to truth. But the problem is that man is finite and he can't come to a universal. So the philosopher has chosen a methodology that's not going to get him to where he wants to go. And you've heard the term postmodernism. Well, this is one of the modern philosophies early in the 20th century, also in the latter part of the 19th century, where man in Western civilization believed that they had found the ultimate thing. It came out of the Enlightenment, Kantian thinking. A second method, or modus operandi, for finding truth would be, for example, science. Now, science has an assumption. It has a modus operandi. It has a means of approaching whatever they hope to find. And that is the phenomenon, the physical. They examine only what is physical, and they come to their conclusion. But if there is anything metaphysical, beyond something beyond which they can examine in a physical sense, then they have precluded coming to that kind of knowledge. So their modus operandi, or their means of operation, was inadequate. And the technical term for science is empiricism. That's an E in case you didn't recognize it there. Now, Christianity has a presupposition as well. These people, Christians, have what we call the Bible, or more technically, we'll call it revelation. Christians have an assumption that God has spoken, and he has spoken from a universal or infinite or absolute perspective, and he has deduced it to man. He has not revealed everything there is to know about reality. He only revealed what he wants us to know about reality. We can't know everything because we are not infinite. We are finite. God is infinite. So therefore, his concept of reality is far beyond, even in eternity. When we die, we'll still be finite creatures. We'll not know everything. We'll spend eternity learning more about God. Now, there is another methodology, and we'll call it the postmodern approach. Now, the postmodern approach, I'm drawing a line on top of that arrow because they don't believe there is any objective reality out there. There is only the perspective of the individual. They call it perspectivalism. And technically, this is solipsism. Solipsism is there is only truth in the individual. It's nice that you're a Muslim, but I'm an atheist. It's nice that you're a Christian, but I'm an agnostic. Everybody has their perspective. That's your perspective. That's my perspective. But the problem is that there's a fundamental assumption in, see, here, this is classified as modern. This is classified as modern, and modernists have often tried, and especially postmodernists have tried to classify Christianity as modern. But it's a mistake. It's a fallacy that they try to create. But these assumptions, these presuppositions about the method for finding truth is very important. But what the postmodernists have come to is that there is no truth. All that is left is skepticism or doubt or uncertainty. They hate the concept of certainty, that you can know something. Even some Christians are trying to avoid the term certainty because of the great hostility to that term among postmodernists. Now, what is the fundamental problem of this, and this? The problem is they approach reality from an a posteriori base. Now, what is a posteriori? A posteriority is you go from the detail to the universal. You begin with individual studies of reality. You categorize those studies, and you categories upon categories until you get to the most comprehensive or general concept that you can. But Christianity isn't a posteriori. Christianity is a priori. Now, did the philosopher study all philosophies of all time, all science of all time, all religions of all time, and did he do it qualitatively? Was he fair to every viewpoint? Did he do it quantitatively? Did he do it exhaustively so that there was nothing left to study, so that he chose the methodology of philosophy? Obviously, he didn't do that, because he is a posteriori. He begins with the detail, and he can't get all of reality into his brain. And the scientist, what scientist has studied all science qualitatively, quantitatively, and exhaustively, and then says the scientific method is the best method? No, he presumes that it's the best method without being fair to every other aspect of reality. So the problem with the postmodernists is they have recognized this. They recognize the finiteness of man, but what they have done is that they have imposed that finiteness presupposition, modus operandi, upon other people. And especially, they have done it through the dialectical method. One form of dialecticalism is you have a thesis, you have an idea about what's real, but then you have an antithesis. And then the antithesis forms a new synthesis. The synthesis forms a new thesis. The new thesis forms a new antithesis, and that forms a new synthesis, and then a new thesis begins, and the process never ends. In other words, since the French postmodernists hit the scene, and that philosophy, postmodernism, has become the predominant philosophical belief system of almost all universities in North America. It's used as the dialectical method is used in almost every high school, and it's even getting into the grade schools. So what has happened is this generation of young people have grown up with a dialectical method. And if they hear anything propositional or anything that is extant truth or objective truth, they view it with a high degree of skepticism. Why? Because their dialectical method is fundamentally skeptical. It's fundamentally one of doubt. And so they have a very hard time getting out of that modus operandi, because that's the modus operandi that they've been educated with from childhood for many decades now. And that's why postmodernism began in roughly the 1990s, and it's really hit the scene in the 21st century. So this is the problem, but Christianity is a priori. Now, why does it have to be a priori? Many people say, well, a priori is a bad logic. No, it's not bad logic. It's only if you are a priori about your premise. Is your premise valid? Is your minor premise valid? And is your conclusion valid? Is your logic good? But some premises can only be established supernaturally. That is, God must reveal himself. There's a concept of truth that we call epidictic truth, absolute truth. how can human beings come to apodictic truth? They can't come to apodictic truth on their own, because apodictic truth implies a universal, implies God. And there's no way that people can come to a true universal without God deducing it for us. Now, in future studies, we're going to look at how God engages our presupposition, how he engages us with our modus operandi, with revelation, and how the Holy Spirit himself launches our presupposition. What launched the presupposition of the philosopher? What launched the presupposition of the scientist? Arbitrary a posteriori approach to truth. But God has taken the initiative to launch the presupposition, to engage the individual. The Holy Spirit will convict the world of sin and of righteousness and of judgment. He will draw all men to himself. Every last man who has ever existed on the face of the earth has been drawn by God. We'll look at that concept more, but I hope that this series has not been too confusing, and that you will have gotten something that's crucial for your Christian life.